What if one angry sentence could shake the world's most powerful military alliance? Behind closed doors, in a room filled with senators, the President of the United States leaned forward and dropped a bombshell. The Turks with Erdogan have gone too far. The words weren't just sharp, they carried a threat. Military supplies to Turkey? Frozen. New tariffs on its economy? On the table. For NATO, it felt like a thunderclap out of nowhere. Because Turkey isn't some small player you can scold and ignore, it's the alliance's second-largest army. It guards the Bosphorus, controls access to the Black Sea, and sits at the very crossroads of Europe and the Middle East. And now, it was suddenly in the crosshairs of Washington's fury. Ankara's public response was calm. Diplomacy first, disagreements must be resolved with dialogue. But behind the scenes, the mood was panic. Turkish officials rushed into emergency meetings, staring down the possibility that American parts for F-16s and Blackhawks might simply stop arriving. That tariffs on steel and textiles could crush hundreds of thousands of jobs. But as fear spread in Ankara, another power stepped quietly onto the stage, and it wasn't Russia, it was China. Xi Jinping's message spread through Chinese state media like a carefully launched missile. It is time for Turkey to reconsider its dependence on the United States. China is ready to be a more reliable partner. The promise wasn't vague. Beijing offered preferential loans to modernize Turkey's defense industry, infrastructure investments to cushion the blow of tariffs, and financial tools to shift trade into the Chinese yuan. Bloomberg reported secret meetings already underway in Doha, Turkish and Chinese delegations discussing energy, military cooperation, and currency trade. For Washington, this was more than bad news. It was a nightmare scenario. Analysts at the Carnegie Endowment didn't mince words. If Turkey drifts toward China, it undermines the very foundation of NATO. Because NATO without Turkey isn't just weaker, it's fractured. The ripple effect hit Europe instantly. German media spoke of a crisis of trust. French commentators reminded readers that Turkey wasn't only a NATO partner, but also the EU's crucial buffer on migration. If Ankara switched allegiance, the Mediterranean balance could shift overnight. And then came the whispers of deeper talks. Reports surfaced of informal consultations at the United Nations, Turkish diplomats and Chinese officials discussing a special fund to offset tariffs. Numbers began circulating, $20 billion over 5 years. For a country drowning in inflation, with the lira falling to historic lows, such promises weren't just appealing, they looked like salvation. Washington tried to strike back. The White House press secretary stood firm. NATO allies must remain loyal. The president himself thundered online. If Turkey plays games with China, they will pay dearly for it. But the threats only deepened the cracks. Instead of retreating, Ankara seemed to drift faster toward Beijing's embrace. Markets noticed. The Turkish lira, which had been sinking for months, suddenly strengthened after whispers of Chinese support. Investors smelled safety. Meanwhile, American defense companies tied to Turkish contracts saw their stocks slip. Billions of dollars in deals now looked uncertain. But the biggest shockwave wasn't economic. It was social. A new Metropole survey revealed the truth in numbers. 55% of Turks now saw China as a promising partner. Trust in the United States? A record low 23%. This wasn't just about governments, it was about people. After years of sanctions, threats, and political pressure, ordinary Turks no longer saw America as a friend. And with China's open hand appearing on the horizon, the choice seemed obvious. Business leaders followed the trend. Turkey's largest associations began openly discussing expanded partnerships with Chinese firms in logistics, telecom, and energy. The shift wasn't secret anymore. It was public, loud, intentional. Washington's fear turned to alarm. Senator Lindsey Graham warned, "Trump is playing with fire, pushing allies into China's arms." Even within the Republican Party, dissent grew. Some lawmakers whispered that by the time the next NATO summit convened, Ankara might not be talking about defense strategies at all. it might be negotiating new credit lines with Beijing, and the timeline was brutally fast. Turkish media, outlets close to Erdogan's administration, reported that a high-level delegation was preparing to travel to Beijing within weeks. Officially, the visit would be about economics. In reality, insiders suggested it was about something far bigger, a realignment of Turkey's future. China, meanwhile, was more than ready. In just this year, Beijing had allocated over $60 billion to building influence from Africa to Latin America. Redirecting part of that toward Turkey, a NATO state at the very core of Western defense, would be nothing less than a masterstroke. And suddenly, the global chessboard looked different. For decades, NATO had been the West's unshakable pillar, with America holding the crown. Allies might argue, protest, even clash over policies, but the structure always held. Yet now, in the heart of that structure, one of its most important members was quietly slipping away, and all because of a single sentence. Ankara still maintained a careful silence. Erdogan avoided dramatic public statements, but the signals grew clearer every day. State-aligned newspapers wrote about new opportunities in the East. Business associations prepared trade missions. Public opinion tilted more sharply with each poll. And through it all, one question echoed in Washington's corridors. What if we lose Turkey? Because this wasn't just about jets and tariffs. It was about the very map of global power. For years, China had expanded at the edges, in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. But Turkey was different. Turkey was NATO's southern anchor, the bridge of continents, the controller of critical straits, the meeting point of East and West. If China claimed Ankara as a partner, the United States wouldn't just face competition, it would face a diplomatic earthquake. Respected analysts warned of a domino effect. If Turkey turned east, who else might follow? Allies tired of Washington's demands? Governments frustrated by sanctions and pressure? The risk of a chain reaction loomed, and then the question would no longer be whether America kept its leadership, but how fast it would lose it. Today, Ankara remains silent, officially, but silence can speak louder than words. Behind it, preparations continue. A delegation ready to fly east, a public ready for change, a rival power ready to pay the price America threatens. The old order, with the U.S. at the center of NATO, commanding loyalty through might and money, is trembling. And in its place, a new reality emerges. A multipolar struggle where China no longer plays at the edges, but strikes directly at the core of Western power. And it all begins with Turkey. So here we are, standing at the edge of something bigger than one dispute, bigger than tariffs, bigger than jets. The world is shifting, the ground beneath NATO's feet is cracking, and the silence from Ankara grows heavier with each passing day. The question now isn't if change is coming, but how far it will go. Is Turkey about to tip the global balance of power toward China, or will Washington find a way to pull it back from the edge before it's too late? Tell me what you think in the comments, because this story isn't just about nations and leaders. It's about the future we're all stepping into.